This is every item a U.S. Army rifleman actually carried into Pacific combat, including 128 rounds of ammunition and the gas mask almost every man threw away. Combat photographs, veteran accounts, and wartime equipment records all reveal the same thing. What soldiers were officially issued and what they truly carried were often completely different. We are rebuilding the real frontline loadout, from weapons and ammunition to food, medical gear, clothing, and the small items that kept a rifleman alive, one item at a time. We have the M1 Garand rifle, the weapon that gave every American squad a rate of fire no other army on the planet could match at the time. It is a gas-operated semi-automatic rifle chambered in .30-06, fed by an 8-round en-bloc clip that ejects itself with a distinctive metallic ping once empty. Adopted in 1936, it gave a Pacific rifleman 8 aimed shots before reloading, while his Japanese counterpart worked a bolt for every single round from the Arisaka Type 99. General Patton is often quoted as calling it the greatest battle implement ever devised, and against an enemy doctrine built around the bolt-action rifle and the bayonet charge, that firepower gap mattered every single day. Next, we have the 1923 cartridge belt, 10 canvas pockets sewn around the waist, each one built to hold a single 8-round clip for the Garand. That works out to 80 rounds on the belt alone, plus one more already chambered if the rifleman kept his weapon loaded, which any soldier who wanted to survive a night attack absolutely did. The belt also carried eyelets for attaching the first aid pouch, canteen, and bayonet, making it the literal backbone of the entire individual load. It was originally designed around the older 1903 Springfield, but the Army simply adapted it for the Garand rather than redesign the whole system, because that is how military logistics works. Let us continue with the bayonet situation, which is messier than most people assume. The official issue from 1943 onward was the M1 bayonet, a 10-inch blade carried in an M7 scabbard, shorter and lighter than its predecessor. Before that, and often alongside it in the Pacific, soldiers carried the M1905 bayonet, a 16-inch blade originally designed for the Springfield M1903. Many riflemen in the Pacific deliberately held on to the longer M1905 because the Type 30 bayonet on the Japanese Arisaka rifle was also long, and nobody wanted to lose a reach contest in a trench at midnight. Moving on to the Mark II fragmentation grenade, the cast-iron pineapple that needed no introduction to anyone who fought through a Pacific bunker line. It weighed about a quarter pound, ran on a 4 to 5 second fuse delay after the spoon released, and threw jagged iron fragments in every direction. Most riflemen carried 2 to 4 of these clipped to their gear, and in cave and bunker fighting on islands like Peleliu and Okinawa, the grenade did more practical work than the rifle ever could. Drolling one through a firing slit was standard procedure because asking politely was not. We have the 6-pocket cotton bandolier, a lightweight strip worn diagonally across the chest, holding 6 more 8-round clips for the Garand. That is 48 additional rounds on top of the 80 already on the belt, giving an assaulting rifleman well over 100 rounds without touching his pack. It was designed to be torn open in a hurry, and most men carried at least one extra bandolier into any operation expected to involve sustained contact. Empty bandoliers ended up scattered across every battlefield once the shooting started, which is part of why they remain some of the cheapest pieces of World War II gear to find today. Next, we have the 1936 Suspenders, the unglamorous webbing harness that kept the entire cartridge belt from sliding down around a soldier's knees. They attached to the belt at multiple points and crossed over the shoulders in an adjustable pattern, distributing the weight of 80 rounds, a canteen, a bayonet, and a first aid pouch across the torso instead of the hips alone. Without them, a fully loaded belt simply migrated downward with every step, which is exactly as miserable as it sounds on a coral ridge. Nobody ever wrote a memoir about how great their suspenders were, but everyone who fought without proper ones complained loudly. Let us continue with the 1928 haversack, the main field pack worn on the back, designed to carry rations, a shelter half, spare clothing, and personal items. It connected to the meat can pouch and the pack carrier as separate attachable pieces, so a soldier could scale the load up or down depending on the mission. On long jungle patrols, men often stripped this down to the bare minimum because every extra pound in 90 degrees humidity turned a march into something much worse. Still, when resupply was uncertain, this pack was the difference between eating that night. Moving on to the M1928 pack carrier, an extension piece that attached to the haversack to increase its capacity for full marching order. It allowed a soldier to lash on a blanket roll, additional rations, or a shelter half and tent poles when a unit was moving rather than fighting in place. In the Pacific, units often left this component behind entirely for combat operations, since amphibious assaults and jungle fighting rewarded a stripped-down load over a complete one. It shows up constantly in supply manifests and barely at all in combat photographs, which tells you everything about how it was actually used. Moving on to the M1928 mess tin pouch, a small canvas pocket attached to the haversack specifically to hold the mess kit. It kept the pan and utensils from rattling around loose and banging against everything else on the pack, which matters more than it sounds when you are trying to move quietly at night. There's nothing complicated here. It held a metal object in place, and it did that one job without complaint. We have the M1943 folding entrenching tool, the combination shovel and pick that replaced the older fixed handle design. The blade folded to lock at 180 degrees for use as a spade or at 90 degrees for use as a pick, all carried in a dedicated canvas carrier on the belt. On volcanic ash, coral rock, and root-choked jungle floor, this tool was the difference between having cover within minutes and not having cover at all. Anyone who has tried to dig into Iwo Jima's volcanic sand with anything less understands exactly why this redesign mattered. Next, we have the M1910 mess kit, an aluminum pan and hinged lid that doubled as a frying pan, the standard field cookware of the entire war. It nested into a compact unit, carried in the mess tin pouch, and paired with the canteen cup for anything that needed heating. In practice, it was used for everything from heating rations to frying captured eggs, assuming a soldier was lucky enough to find any. Aluminum conducts heat fast and retains it for approximately no time at all, so anyone who has burned their hands on one of these understands the design trade-off immediately. Let us continue with the M1910 canteen, an aluminum 1-quart container with a chained cap, carried in a canvas cover attached to the belt. 1 quart sounds like plenty until you're sweating through your uniform in tropical humidity, climbing a ridge with 80 rounds on your hip. Refilling from jungle streams, rain collection, and captured wells was routine because resupply by boat or aircraft could not always keep pace with what a man actually drank in that heat. Staying hydrated was not optional in the Pacific, and this is the item that made it possible between resupplies. Moving on to the M1910 canteen cup, which nested onto the bottom of the canteen inside its carrier and served as the primary tool for boiling water and heating rations. It held roughly 1 pint, had folding wire handles, and could sit directly over a small fire or heat tab without melting, which was the entire point. This is the item that turns suspicious jungle water into something that wouldn't immediately put a soldier in the aid station. Combined with purification tablets, which happens to be next, it formed the backbone of staying hydrated without dying of dysentery. We have water purification tablets, small chemical tablets dropped into a canteen or canteen cup to treat questionable water sources. They were issued as part of the individual medical kit and became essential in a theater where clean water was never guaranteed and dysentery can take a unit out of the fight faster than enemy bullets. The taste was reportedly unpleasant, though reportedly unpleasant is doing a lot of work in most veteran accounts, where the actual word choices tend to be considerably less polite. Still, an unpleasant taste was a small price for not spending the next 3 days in a slit trench for reasons that had nothing to do with the enemy. Next, we have the M2 Individual Medical Jungle Kit, introduced in 1944 to replace the bulkier M1 kit. It was a small olive-drab canvas pouch that hooked directly onto the belt, containing atabrine tablets for malaria suppression, sulfadiazine tablets, insect repellent, iodine, and adhesive bandages. Malaria put more men out of action in the Pacific than enemy bullets did in several campaigns, so this unassuming little pouch was arguably more tactically significant than the bayonet. Atabrine also turned skin yellow with prolonged use, which soldiers noticed immediately, and high command spent considerable effort insisting was nothing to worry about.
Let us continue with the M1942 first aid pouch, a small canvas pocket worn on the cartridge belt that held the Carlisle dressing. The Carlisle dressing was a sterile compress bandage designed for immediate application to a gunshot or shrapnel wound, packaged to stay sterile until torn open. It was not a full medical kit. It was a single, fast first response to stop bleeding until a medic arrived, and in combat, that distinction mattered enormously.
Moving on to the M1 steel helmet, a two-part design consisting of an outer manganese steel shell and an inner fiber liner with its own suspension webbing. Adopted in 1941, it provided real protection against shrapnel and glancing rounds, which is the basic job a helmet is supposed to do. Off the battlefield, it also served as a wash basin, a cooking pot, and a stool, because a soldier will repurpose anything that holds its shape. The Army issued it as head protection. The infantry treated it as the most versatile piece of cookware in the Pacific, and both uses were, in their own way, correct. Moving on to the M1942 HBT uniform, a two-piece herringbone twill cotton uniform in solid olive drab, designed for the heat and humidity of jungle combat. And to address the obvious question immediately, no, this is not camouflage. The reversible green and brown frog skin pattern was a separate garment, issued in limited numbers and mostly associated with the Marine Corps, not the standard Army rifleman's uniform. The HBT dried faster than wool and had large cargo pockets for maps and rations, which, in a climate where everything stayed permanently damp, was less a luxury and more a basic requirement for not rotting from the inside out. Next, we have the service shoes, paired with M1938 canvas leggings, the footwear combination most Pacific riflemen wore for the majority of the war. The shoes were ankle-high russet leather boots, and the leggings were canvas wraps that buttoned and laced from the ankle up to mid-calf, theoretically to keep debris and moisture out. In practice, in jungle mud and river crossings, the leggings did an excellent job of trapping water and debris inside rather than keeping it out, which is the opposite of their stated purpose. They were eventually phased out in favor of the double-buckle combat boot, and approximately nobody in the Pacific theater mourned their departure. Let us continue with the wool olive drab undershirt and drawers, standard issue underwear for every soldier in every theater, including the tropical Pacific. Wool was chosen because it manages moisture and resists odor better than cotton over long periods without laundering, which made sense for a soldier who might not see a clean uniform for weeks. It also made sense for the freezing mud of a European winter, which is a different theater entirely, and quartermaster logistics did not always distinguish between the two. Wearing wool underwear in equatorial humidity was exactly as comfortable as it sounds. Moving on to wool olive drab socks, issued for the same moisture management reasons as the underwear, and considerably more justifiable. Wool socks reduce blistering on long marches by managing moisture against the skin, which matters enormously when your feet are wet for days at a time with no dry ground in sight. Grim. Foot health was a constant concern in the Pacific, where jungle rot and trench foot could take a man out of action just as effectively as a wound. Confetti. Unlike the underwear, almost nobody complained about the socks because everybody understood exactly what they were for. We have the MK ration, the individual combat ration issued in 3 separate units for breakfast, dinner, and supper, each packaged in its own waxed cardboard box. Each unit contained a canned meat product, biscuits, a chocolate or fruit bar, instant coffee or lemon drink powder, cigarettes, and chewing gum. It was originally designed for paratroopers and assault troops who needed something compact for short operations, and then it became the default ration for far longer than anyone originally intended. Soldiers who lived on K rations for weeks at a time had extremely consistent opinions about them, and those opinions were not positive. Next, we have the D ration, a 4-ounce emergency chocolate bar designed to provide roughly 600 calories when nothing else was available. Rye. It was deliberately formulated to taste only slightly better than a boiled potato with a high melting point, specifically so hungry soldiers would not eat it as a snack and leave nothing for an actual emergency. In other words, the United States Army spent real time and real money making chocolate taste bad on purpose. It worked exactly as intended, which is more than can be said for most ration design decisions of the era. Let us continue with dog tags. 2 stamped tags worn on a cord around the neck, listing name, serial number, blood type, and religious preference. Dramatic. One persistent story claims the notch on early dog tags was designed to wedge between a dead soldier's teeth for identification. Confetic. That is false and has been debunked repeatedly. The notch existed purely to hold the blank steady in the stamping machine. Serious. Every soldier carried 2 for a practical reason. One stayed with the body, and one went with the report, ensuring a man was accounted for even if recovery took time. Moving on to the identification card, sometimes called the AGO card after the Adjutant General's office that issued it, carried in a soldier's wallet alongside his dog tags. It listed the same core information: name, rank, serial number, and blood type, functioning as a backup form of identification separate from the metal tags. It rarely shows up in war movies because a piece of paper in a wallet is not visually interesting, but bureaucracy followed soldiers everywhere, including into combat. The Army wanted paperwork on a man even while he was being shot at, and the Army got its paperwork. After that comes the toothbrush and tooth powder, standard personal hygiene issue that traveled in the haversack rather than on the belt. Tooth powder rather than paste was the standard formulation of the era, packed in small tins or tubes depending on the supply year. Confetic. Dental problems were a genuine medical concern for an army fighting far from proper dental care, so this was not a vanity item, even though it's easy to assume otherwise. It is also one of the few items on this list a soldier could use exactly the same way at home as he did on Peleliu. We have the razor and shaving soap, issued to maintain grooming standards that, depending on the unit and the campaign, ranged from strictly enforced to completely theoretical. The standard double-edged safety razor and a bar of shaving soap were small, light, and easy to pack, which is presumably why they survived in the kit list long before daily shaving became a luxury for frontline troops. Photographs from extended jungle operations show plenty of beards that suggest this item spent a lot of time unused at the bottom of a pack. Still, when a unit rotated back for any kind of rest, this was usually the first thing reached for. Next, we have the olive drab cotton towel, standard personal issue used for exactly what you would expect a towel to be used for. In a climate where soldiers were perpetually wet from rain, sweat, river crossings, or all three at once, a dry towel was a genuinely valuable commodity, even if it rarely stayed dry for long. It also doubled as padding, a sweat rag, and occasionally a makeshift bandage when official medical supplies ran short. Rye. Nobody wrote songs about the towel, but everybody who had one used it constantly. Finally, we have the bar of soap, the last and least glamorous item on this list, issued for hygiene and basic laundry. In a theater defined by mud, sweat, jungle rot, and tropical disease, basic hygiene was not optional, and soap was one of the few tools available to fight all of it at once. Serious. A clean uniform was rare, but a man who could at least wash himself reduced his odds of skin infections that could and did take soldiers out of action. Reflective. It's the most mundane item on this entire list, and also one of the quietly important ones, which is a fitting note to end on for a war fought as much against the environment as against the enemy.